Hello and welcome back. In this video series, I'm going through every season of Once Upon a Time to look at whether the characters come from fairy tales, and if not, what kinds of stories they do come from. This is part 7, so if you'd like to watch from the beginning, check the description for a link to the playlist. Season 7 of Once Upon a Time is almost a complete reboot. Henry and a few of the other characters stick around, but most of the original cast is gone, or at least only appears occasionally, and we have a whole new group of fairy tale characters from a whole new enchanted forest. What this means is that there are actually many more new fairy tale characters than in seasons 3, 4, and 5, but they're often some of the same fairy tales that we've seen before, like Hansel and Gretel or Cinderella. One of the major new stories being introduced and focused on this season is Cinderella. Now, we did see another version of Cinderella way back in season 1 with Ashley, who made a deal with Rumpelstiltskin in order to go to the ball, but this is a completely new Cinderella. Her name is Jacinda, and we meet her stepsisters and her stepmother, and Henry actually acts as the prince in her story. Sort of. Because there is another prince as well who she goes to the ball to try and assassinate. So it's not 100% for sure that Henry is the prince with the glass slipper that she goes and meets at the ball, because it is given the Once Upon a Time treatment with the story being significantly convoluted and changed. But grown-up Henry is basically Cinderella's prince. Additionally, we find out that Cinderella's stepmother is originally Rapunzel, and it's actually the Disney version of Rapunzel at this point. I think it's really interesting that they chose to do their own take on Rapunzel back in season 3, but then chose to use the Disney Rapunzel, Tangled, with all of its, floating lanterns and the style of the tower, and the general look of Rapunzel's costume and hair, now in season 7 when she becomes a villain. But that's kind of consistent with what they've done before. They gave young Regina, for instance, a very Disney princess type appearance and demeanor, even though she wasn't directly based on another Disney princess. So it's really not surprising, it's just kind of an interesting take on it. Mother Gothel also appears as one of the season's many villains that kind of rotate in and out. And then we meet Tiana and Naveen from The Princess and the Frog. Now, when I did Beauty and the Beast back in season 1, I talked about how Gaston really wasn't a fairy tale character, he was something that Disney had added. The same applies to Dr. Facilier. He is a major part of the Princess and the Frog movie by Disney, but in older versions of the fairy tale, as told by the Brothers Grimm, for instance, we don't usually meet the person who turned the prince into a frog. So that's something that Disney added. He is more of a Disney character than a fairy tale, but the Princess and the Frog itself still comes from the fairy tale The Frog Prince. We see another version of Hansel and Gretel. Hansel is also Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk, at least I think it's kind of implied that he is. Gretel we see as one of the witches trying to join Mother Gothel's little circle of witches, and we meet their father and another version of the Blind Witch. So that's another fairy tale that we saw way back in season 1, and we see a very different version of it here. And then, as far as I can tell, the only new character that is not either a fairy tale character or a Once Upon a Time original character is Alice. Alice is the Wish Realm version of Hook's daughter with Mother Gothel. It's a very long, convoluted story how that happened. She kind of plays a bit of a Rapunzel-type role, being locked in a tower for a long time, but for the most part, she is Alice from Alice in Wonderland. As I mentioned before when I discussed Jefferson and the caterpillar and Cora as the Queen of Hearts, Alice in Wonderland is not really a fairy tale. It's a children's novel, much like Pinocchio, Peter Pan, and The Wizard of Oz. So overall, we have 9 fairy tales represented. 5 of those carried over from previous seasons, and 4 are newly introduced, although 3 of those are kind of redos of fairy tales that they did much earlier on. We have 5 stories adapted from children's books, or more accurately, adapted from Disney movies that are adapted from children's books. Those are often grouped together with fairy tales, but they technically are not. We have the apprentice from the movie Fantasia, who is just a Disney character. We have Dr. Facilier, who comes from a Disney movie that comes from a fairy tale, but he is something that Disney added. We have a brief appearance from Robin Hood, who as mentioned in multiple previous videos, originally comes from a legend, and some characters that are just original characters created by the Once Upon a Time writers, like Emma and Henry, although, as I mentioned, with Henry it's a little bit more ambiguous this season because he also plays the role of Cinderella's prince. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more like this, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I post videos once or twice a week. I'll be doing one more video in this series just to kind of wrap up, so definitely if you like this, stay tuned for more.